guys. Thanks for coming on to the roundtable. My name's Shaariq. I'm from Amicus. Just to kind of give you an insight of myself, so I deal with the AI machine learning side of things in the US, specifically with health tech companies. I've hosted this roundtable to talk about the operationalizing AI in healthcare, data safety, and transformation as well. Do you guys want to give a little introduction, starting from Kevin?
Sure. I've been in the AI space for about 6 years. Prior to that, I did a lot of work in the area of like data management, application management, working with large Blue Cross Blue Shields, like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Maryland, which is called Care First, Highmark, Blue Cross Blue Shield in Pittsburgh, helped them in a number of different ways in terms of modernizing applications. And then most recently at Capgemini, heading up their Gen AI and Agentic AI for solutions in healthcare and life sciences.
Nice, thank you. And Shaheen?
Hey everyone, nice to meet everyone. My name is Shaheen, and I am an applied AI scientist and an AI product leader. I work at the intersection of AI and healthcare, and I'm also a responsible AI champion and was nominated one of the top 100 women in AI ethics for 2025. I help enterprises to leverage their data, AI, and technology to build products that can help them improve experiences, efficiency, and reduce costs.
Perfect, thank you. And Matt, yourself?
Yeah, my name's Matt Hanauer. Was there a little background from me?
Yeah.
Are you guys hearing that?
Yeah.
That's weird.
Um,
We weren't getting that before. Okay, I think it's gone now. Okay. Well, you can cut that out. My name's Matt Hanauer. I've worked in healthcare for a while. I actually got my start, working the overnight shifts at a youth center, and been working in behavioral health for a while, doing research, and then when data science became a thing, switched into that, and have been working currently at MedeAnalytics. So. I heard Kevin talk about a lot of the same folks that we work with as well on the payer side. We work with providers as well and try to provide. My job is to really help them, identify what do we think is going to happen, in the future, or for providers, we really try to help them, avoid denials and things like that. So excited to talk with this group and see what insights they have.
Perfect, thank you. And finally, Sanghita.
Hi, I'm Sanghita Bhattacharya. I work for Johnson & Johnson, and I wouldn't consider myself purely a data scientist. I have been in the data science organization for the past 4 years, but I consider myself a bilingual person who came from clinical operations background. So primarily a clinical operations scientist who understands the problem which we have in our daily clinical operations setting and how do we solve those business problems with data AI. So I've been working very closely with our physicians, scientists, data scientists, precisely to operationalize the issues with data and AI, be it accelerating a trial, finding the right patient population, or creating machine learning algorithm to engage with sites in a much more efficient manner.
Perfect. Thank you. And just to kind of get things going, I'll just read out the first question, and then if anyone wants to obviously feel free to start the topic, then that'll be perfect. So the first question is, what are the biggest challenges in collecting, standardizing, and maintaining high quality data for AI in healthcare?
I can take it, Shaariq, if it's okay. Given it's every AI practitioner's favorite pet peeves to talk about data challenges. So today to answer this question, I'd like to break this into three parts. The first is the data, the second is the data for AI, and then the third is the data for AI in healthcare. So as we know in healthcare, every encounter between patient, payer, and provider, it generates tons of data. You have your claims data, EMR data, lab data, benefits data, pricing data, prior auth data, care management data. There's literally so many other sources of data. Like volumes of data get generated by healthcare industry. But what we're discussing here, however, is data for AI. The challenges in creating that data for AI and then collecting, standardizing, and maintaining high quality data for AI. Now, as we know, AI applications need to be fed data to get any predictions or insights from AI. And then data needs to be created for building any AI product, any AI model. And if it's what we call supervised AI models, we need labeled data or annotated data that needs to be created. Now, this labeled or annotated data is also required for any kind of evaluation of AI products, including your LLM and Gen AI powered products. Now, almost 6 years ago, if you remember, Obermeyer had a publication in Science, this was in 2019, where he highlighted problematic data being used for building AI in healthcare. And I believe the title of the paper was Dissecting Racial Bias in an Algorithm Used to Manage the Health of Population. So what the paper had highlighted was that the data that was created was not fit for the purpose and was problematic in many ways. And the way the data was created for AI had led the algorithm to learn to identify patients with higher healthcare cost as sicker patients. And according to the paper, the algorithm falsely concluded that Black patients are healthier than equally sick white patients. And as a consequence, of course, less money was spent on Black patients, additional help was provided to Black patients who had the same level of need. So what this means is that the data, the examples that are created for the AI to learn from, they need to be verified and validated. And when we talk about data for AI, the definition of data itself is not just raw data, but it also includes your labeled data, your annotated data, your ground truth data, which can be expensive and time consuming to create. And it requires subject matter expertise, such as your clinicians, your coders, or even your administrators. And this is critical. I think we will all agree more than ever now for evaluation of these Gen AI and LLM powered products, which, as we know, are being built and deployed at breakneck speed. And we know that the evaluation is the biggest bottleneck today. And it requires collecting data, creating that ground truth data. And the bar for data for AI in healthcare is much, much higher. Not only does the data need to be accurate, of good quality, it also needs to be available in sufficient quantity and must be representative of the population that will be impacted by the decision or recommendations from the said AI. So the biggest challenge I would say for the data for AI in healthcare, I would say, is not enough investment in designing, creating, appropriate sharing, and maintaining this data for AI, and conflating and confusing the existence of data, the raw data, with existence of data for AI, AI-ready data. And even designing what to collect, when to collect, how to collect, in a way is key to success with AI. Because when wrong things are collected or right things are not collected in the right way, monitoring any AI system for working as intended, measuring AI systems for outcomes or ROI, this cannot be done. And designing for collecting the right things, it's also really what allows for incremental improvements of these AI systems. And in healthcare, interoperability or lack thereof, as we know, is an area that a lot of work is being done today. And most of the issues with interoperability today comes from this lack of designing and thoughtful creation and collection of data. And we have this massive problem with fragmented data in healthcare. We have patient data which is scattered across EHRs, imaging systems, labs, payer files, and all of them using different vocabularies, different interfaces. This really prevents creating this high quality data for AI. Honestly, at times, even acceptable data for AI, for evaluation and measurement, for training and validation. So, as we make progress in closing these foundational gaps in data for I think AI will start to live up to its potential. And I want to share this one recent thing that I saw on social media. I don't know if you saw that Verily, which is a precision health company, they announced the launch of that new consumer health app called Verily Me. And the app is, as you know, is designed to close gaps in care and enable people to stay informed and engaged in their health journey over time. And there were several posts on social media after the launch, and which kind of highlights what we are discussing here, the data challenges. Users were reporting that the app recommendation, like the app was unable to connect to their My Chart. And in one instance, one of the user reported that the app recommendation was that they needed diabetes screening, even though it had already been done. So the recommendation was actually based on the lack of data. And I think we'll agree, as brilliant as the idea is, but to truly to come to fruition, these giant holes in patient data need to be filled. And recommendations have to be based on truth, the full truth. There's a saying that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and in healthcare AI, partial truth can take us this to a whole another level of risk. And I would say that along with your complete, correct, and connected data, we also need data versioning, data provenance needs to be in place because the lack of metadata about how we are creating this data makes any kind of auditing, any kind of replication or monitoring a big challenge. And especially in regulated industry like healthcare, where states or even clients, they may have very unique restrictions on the use of AI or their data for some specific things. So, to kind of really close this off, I genuinely believe that in healthcare, transformation really needs to happen at the data for AI layer, making data AI ready, because there is mountains of raw data, but data for AI, that requires investment, requires deep AI expertise as well as health and clinical expertise. Your evaluation strategy, your measurement strategy, your building strategy all depend on the availability of this data. So, really, turning raw data into AI ready data is the key, I believe, to unlocking the value from AI. And I'll maybe pass it over to Kevin.
Sure. Those are great points. I agree with what you said, and I think the devil's always in the detail, right? But the work that I'm doing with healthcare providers, like a healthcare system or an insurance company like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, they're all looking at where can I start using AI in order to start saving money, cutting costs. So, I usually start with a use case, like a use case around, charge capture, where they're capturing the charge and they're reconciling that. That's a great application use case for AI, right? But where the challenge comes in is like, where do you then, what the use case is, where, you can help you save money, right? And lower cut your costs, but where do I go to get the data? And within a big hospital system, you have Epic, you have the hospital information system that includes the information, system for patients, administrative system. So the question becomes, how do I go and, get that kind of data from those different systems within the organization? And then where do I go, let's say externally, and get multi-model data? how do I do that, or do I need to do that, right? So, the point about the, what she was talking about, what Shaheen was talking about is right on. The typically what I see, if somebody's going to be spending money for a investment in Gen AI, they start with the use case, and then where the challenge becomes, not only technical, but maybe organizational, is around where do you collect the data, who owns the data, who governs the data, how ready is it, how often is it refreshed? A lot of those areas are areas that I think you really need to have like a data strategy individual there that's managing that activity.
I can add on to what you're saying from a very different lens, not from patient providers, but if you look at even the clinical trial space, in large organizations, the challenge has been we have too many tools, right? So we have multiple tools through the clinical trial process. So it's a very, I would say, very, very complex process to start with, that we do not have one tool or one system. And some of these systems don't talk to each other, right? So that leads to multiple IDs for multiple entities, even a site. For us, site doesn't mean necessarily, what you guys are looking at, but primarily how many patients they're enrolled at the site. However, then you lose if you get the granularity, you lose the big picture. And if you get the big picture, you lose the granularity, because each site then has so many physicians, and then they have multiple therapeutic area. So to your point, the data governance and data stewardship is critical. And the challenge is that readiness of data for AI. And the biggest challenge is people do not know where the data exists. There are data in different sources. And once you bring out the data, then how do you create that continuum of data? Because then how do you create that one ID that works across the same site throughout, say, so many years? So that has been a challenge. I'm not sure if any pharma sponsor has solved it. They are trying to. I know that a lot of companies who are trying to solve it, but the challenge still sits where, some of the tech companies are probably much more forward thinking versus pharma, where we sit on a treasure trove of data, but utilization of the data, the cleaning, curation, and managing a huge data lake at the enterprise level, that's still in works.
Yeah. When I used to PA students, and then I also had interns back in the day, they'd come out of taking a stats 101 class or like something like that. And then they would intern with us, and they would actually see what like a real EHR looks like. And, it was like someone told them the Easter Bunny wasn't real. Because they had never seen real data like that. They're professors, and I'm guilty of this too. When I was TAing, we would take the hard work out of it. So we would like clean the data for them. So I think a lot of this, we talk about all this, but I think also when we're training folks to be the next generation of folks who are, going to be implementing AI, developing these models, taking a step back and not just jumping into what can Claude do for us or Anthropic, or what can I just throw a machine learning model at this real quick, taking the time, like we were talking about, setting up the use case. What is the actual problem? Let me look at the data set. Is there a code book? Does one exist? Do we need to create it? And teaching folks those basic skills of how do I make sure I have good, clean data. So when they come to our companies, they have that skill set, and they don't have, we can bridge that gap more quickly and develop the next generation of folks developing these tools who know the importance of all the things that we all just mentioned here.
Yeah, when it comes to, on the optimistic side, there are some use cases which are like low-hanging fruit, like within the pharma industry. If you're going to be doing, scientific research, you can get data, readily available data from within the company. You can go to your data warehouse. You can get external data, public data, academic data, third-party research data. So you can actually, start, chipping away at some use cases, again, like in pharma, early on development, not drug development, but, research and scientific research. that's kind of low hanging fruit where you can implement like a Gen AI use case fairly quickly and fairly easily and fairly inexpensively, which provides, big impact, good big impact for the scientists. So there are a lot of what I see low hanging fruit applications out there that could be, developed using Gen AI.
And interestingly, a lot of the challenge has been people not understanding roles. Like a data engineer is very different than a data scientist, right?
Yeah.
Some people who are deep in the data engineering piece, they understand the architecture, they understand the backend, versus some have the skills of coding and building models, right? And somehow they also don't speak the same language, believe it or not, in the same company. So how do you bring those people together to speak the same language so that they can work more efficiently is going to be very critical.
Yeah, I think I think for me that's helped me out a lot. So when I want to understand a certain product that we have lots of good documentation, but sometimes it's written in a way that isn't written for our data science team. It's written for our data engineers or our product team or another team. And so I've used, and we've built tools at our company to help that. I think that's where AI can help be that translator. So I don't have to be able to speak product, C-suite, data engineering, all those different languages. I can take whatever I have and I can be like, hey, put this in the format of a C-suite presentation, put this in the format of my data engineers, or the vice versa. And I do this with some of my direct reports code. Like they write this great project, but it's like, oh man, it's a lot. So I will use that to be able to translate, hey, help me translate this really cool project into something for the product team or the go-to-market team so that they can get it in their language. So that's another area where it can help bridge those gaps between everybody speaking the same language.
I think effectively we're all saying that to truly unlock the value from AI, we have to really get that data ready to be consumed by AI systems, ready to be even build any kinds of AI systems. I think it is so important to get this piece right, because bad data can be super, super problematic, especially in healthcare.
No, thank you guys for your thoughts on the first question. It's quite informative and it helps me understand your guys' lives a bit easier as well, and seeing how difficult it can be at times. But moving on to the next question, it was how can organizations ensure AI deployment prioritizes patient safety and ethical standards?
I can I can get started if you're okay. So I would say really to ensure that AI prioritizes safety and ethics, there are three big things that I think that can go a long way to get this to accomplish this. So the very first, I believe that for all AI systems that are live, that are in production, the source data that is fed into the AI to generate any recommendation, any prediction, they should be audited periodically. They should be audited for quality, for completeness, and for accuracy. And even the predictions or the outputs from AI systems, they should also be audited for error rate. And the error rates should be disclosed and reported. The second thing I would say is that when building AI applications or AI systems, the performance of the system that was deemed adequate or good enough for it to be deployed, that should be declared. And additionally, even the performance should be reported on various groups and in various settings as applicable. And I would even say consulting with ethicists, legal, patient, as well as clinical reps during the build process should be part of the process. And really, then again, what's coming to mind is there was an article in Wired some years ago, and the article was on a drug addiction risk algorithm. And I think the title of the article was The Pain Was Unbearable, so why did doctors turn her away? And the gist of the article was that corrupt data was fed to the AI that resulted in AI flagging the patient for being a high risk for addiction. which was blindly accepted by the doctor's office, and the actions taken subsequently from that wrong prediction harmed the patient egregiously. And the the Verily Me app that I was mentioning earlier, recommending, a diabetes screening when it had already been done, the root cause is the same. The source data fed to the algorithm was faulty, incomplete, and corrupt. And every time when patients are at the receiving end of decisions or recommendations from AI, patients should have some means to review their information that gets fed into AI to generate any recommendation or predictions for them and about them. They should be able to decline the recommendation coming from bad data about them. Options for, let's say, opt-in or even consent should be available. And even the capability to flag incorrect information, missing information, can go a long way in mitigating these situations, ensuring patient safety. And lastly, I would say training the clinical staff to not accept AI blindly, to take the output from AI with a grain of salt and exercise their better judgment as appropriate. I would say even some basic education on AI metrics such as error rate, false positive, false negative, omission, hallucination, relationship between quality of AI outputs to the quality of data fed to the AI. These should be mandatory when using AI as a decision support tool in clinical settings. UI patterns should be implemented such that they require clinician acknowledgement and even capture override reasons. I think we will all agree that healthcare is always personal, and patient safety and ethics should be a priority above all.
Yeah, one of the more tactical. Oh, go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was going to say I was interfacing with a large healthcare company, healthcare network in Vermont, and they did a survey of the nurses, and 60% of the nurses, 60% felt that the management of the health network would not be considerate of the patient's safety when implementing AI. 60%.
That's a big number.
So you got the people who are doing the actual work that are taking care of the people. They think the AI is going to hurt the people that they're taking care of.
Yikes. Yeah. I think what I was going to say, we don't deal as much with patient safety, but it would be more on the ethical side. So a lot of time we're making predictions around whether or not someone's going to be expensive next year or a claim's going to be denied. But one of the things that folks want to know, and this can lead into patient safety along those predictions, is the field of explainable AI. And particularly my favorite tool within that field are called chat values. And so those, for at least your predictive for all of your predictive modeling, they can tell you of your inputs, which one of those inputs is having the most impact and in which direction. So let's say I'm trying to predict whether or not a claim is going to be denied. And so it can tell me, is it because of this ICD-10 code or this with this combination of a CPT code? And it can tell me, how much is that impacting, like 10, 20, 30%. So you could think about that in, a different setting for a patient safety. We're trying to predict whether or not someone's going to this surgery is going to be successful or not, or something like that. And you can see what are the factors that might be driving that. And so you can see, this person has these 4 conditions. When these 4 conditions are present, our model thinks that, their likelihood of not having successful surgery goes up by a lot. So you can use that explainability to understand what's happening in the model. And then also you could see what we were talking about. If there's issues with the data, you're like, hey, this person has this diagnosis, but I just talked to him yesterday and I don't know where that came from, but I'm their doctor and they do not have this. So I can take that out of the model and then recalculate. So that might link into some of the stuff we were talking about, being able to make it clear what's going into the model and what's driving those predictions.
I could not patient directly a safety perspective, but from even retaining a patient in a clinical trial has been a challenge for sponsors, right? How do you make them come back? We have so many visits and follow-up visits lasting 2, 3 years, and not even oncology, like a chronic disease in cardiovascular space. The challenge, again, it comes back to having access to that clean data. In this case, having even access to social determinants of health, right? How do you understand the person of a certain social determinants of health, be it a certain income level, has more propensity of not following through a trial? And interestingly, there has been a lot of work being done, but again, it's probably a tangent to where you're looking at patient safety, but the predictions to look at if the patients are going to be successful in going through the trial. And one of the challenges has been, of course, one is social determinants of health, but the other has been, how do we look at their pre-existing conditions? Because sometimes those pre-existing conditions, when they are enrolled in a trial, has a big bearing on whether they will continue in the trial, right? And that's where the ability to find that data, and sometimes those data are not available to a sponsor, right? That's probably in a hospital setting under EMR data where that exists. So I'm curious from your perspective, and Shaheen, it seems like you've done a lot of work in this area. Like, is there a connection between the clinical trial space and what exists in some of these payers data, and how do those converge? And eventually, I guess that would be the trials of future.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to, yeah. I mean, honestly, what you're saying to me, as in like, working in the bias space, even when you design a cohort that is fit for your clinical trial, I mean, there have been so many instances where the clinical trials are only done on men. Women are not even part of those clinical trials, but then those drugs are still prescribed to us. I mean, I was just reading this article the other day, the way the women like manifest the symptoms when they're having a heart attack as opposed to when a male is having a heart attack. Even they are so wildly different. But then the research has been so much focused. The trials are only done on a very particular demographic, which is a huge problem from a bias perspective, if you ask me. And this again goes back to patient safety, Sangeeta. Like, how do we make sure that when we are designing a clinical trial, we have representation from all age groups, from all genders, so that we know the efficacy of the drug under consideration. How does it work? How well does it work on this group versus that group? So I can understand the challenge in even creating a cohort and then following them through over certain years to see how they are being impacted by, the drugs that they are kind of testing out. So yeah, I hear you. I mean, it is definitely challenging, but then at the same time, so critical that the cohorts there's no, in technical words, there is no sampling bias or selection bias when we design our cohorts for any clinical trial. So yeah, I mean, definitely seems like there could be synergies. And I know a lot of people are working in this area. A lot of organizations are supporting identifying the cohort which are fit for a certain trial. And then, of course, there is work to be done, like you said, to ensuring that they continue over the duration of the trial so that we can collect all the data that is needed to do even the analysis that can conclude what's the efficacy of the drug.
And the tokenization, I probably have heard, like everybody was talking about tokenization 2 years ago. I don't hear that anymore now with AI, but people were trying to see if there's a way to connect, right, in de-identified fashion, the patient's journey, even beyond the trial, right, so that you can see the outcomes 5 years after the trial has ended. But we'll see. The results are yet to be published.
Yeah, I think what I see out there is from a data perspective, it really we would need to look at the different industries. Like if you're looking at clinical trials within pharma, there's a whole area of data that's available for logistics and movement of product to be used for doing the trial. So that's sort of like its own little sector. And if you look at what Matt's talking about with maybe insurance companies, healthcare insurance companies, where you can find the data, you can really, ensure that the data is good and you've got it, and then you apply your algorithms to that. And then you have like Shaheen is saying, is in terms of the the doctors and the people that are actually the hospitals, where you need to have a higher level of protection, right? Where you can do things that with AI, like for example, nurse scheduling, which is a big problem. You can use AI for like effective nurse scheduling. So there's pockets of areas within each one of these sectors, if you will, where you can start using AI and you're able to get your arms around it. But if there's no like one golden rule across everything. It really comes down to what's the like Matt was saying, what's the use case? What you're trying to solve?
Perfect. Thank you, guys. I'm conscious on time. Do you guys want to continue going through the questions, or do you want to go through any kind of questions that you guys might have that can help each other out potentially? I'm just wondering, what do you guys think will be better?
So I think what your next question was workflow integration around, like what strategies to help, successful AI integration. I think we touched a little bit earlier on that when Kevin and Matt both kind of touched a little bit on that, like 60% number that Kevin shared. To me, like what's the good way? What does it take for successful AI integration? I think the very first thing I would say that a co-design with your end users, the frontline clinicians. The 60% number that Kevin shared, only if the development had been done with the end users in mind. If the nurses and the clinicians were involved in the build process, then they would catch these gaps, if you will, sooner and build to it, rather than continue to build in silo, only to find out later that 60% of the clinicians are reporting no help from the said product, if you will, right? So really the successful strategy for integration, I would say the first thing is you need to map all the current workflows, the pain points, and the decision moments, and work from there. Co-design with your end users, your frontline clinicians, especially in the space of healthcare. That is so critical. And then I would even say that what Matthew was saying earlier, like how can you make sure that when you bring in a new product into a clinical workflow, it doesn't cause additional work on the end users. We have to embed it in a way so that the outputs are surfaced where the clinicians are already acting. You have to avoid any extra cognitive load, if you will. Reduce clicks, embed the recommendations and insights into the existing interfaces rather than having two other things or two other clicks, because over time it cumulatively builds up. Really, AI succeeds when it delivers timely, actionable predictions at the point of decision, not as a separate artifact that clinicians have to consult. Systems, the people, and the processes must align. And I think that's what Kevin and Matthew both were alluding to a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I know one of the things I learned. So yeah, partnering, Shaheen, like you're right. So one of the, my favorite people to work with at our company her name's Christine Stetler, and she was a former nurse. And so I work really closely with her on, she can kind of tell me exactly, hey, when I was a nurse, this is what we used to do. And she's taught me so much about what happens, inside a hospital. Cause I haven't worked inside a hospital before. I've worked with their data. But one of the things that she showed me that I know we've been trying to do at our company, I'm sure lots of other folks are doing, is you get a big dashboard and you get a bunch of numbers, and it's really hard to figure out. I just need you to kind of summarize this for me and tell me. And so one of the things I know AI does well, and that's why we're applying it at our company, is trying to take all that really important information. So summarizing those different predictions, if we're going to say, hey, this claim is likely to be denied, we can summarize, well, it's because of these reason codes and these top inputs that are driving that. And then we can, what we try and do, and I would encourage other folks to do this, is try and like summarize that, all together in, either it's a different field or something like that, that kind of tells them, hey, here are the reasons why we think it's going to be denied. Here's the likelihood of denial. Here's how much it might cost. And then here's what you can do about it. And ideally, Shaheen, we would, have that completely integrated with, their EHR, and they could click a button and do that. That part is really, really hard, but even just getting to that summarization can be really helpful for folks who, instead of swimming through a sea of data.
Absolutely, Matt. Like the guidance must be super clear and should always include the why. And I would also add one more piece to it, that the UI and UX should always be very human-centered, with very fast and easy path for our clinicians to either accept, modify, or even ignore the guidance, right? Like, I think every product should do lots of usability testing with representative clinicians in the settings that the product is intended to be used. I think these things, these strategies can go a long way in ensuring that the product does not kind of, has unnecessary friction when it comes to deploying it.
I could add on to what you're saying, right? Bringing people in that journey is very critical.
Absolutely.
If you don't bring them in the journey and then send a tool which adds to their work, and I love the word which you used, cognitive load. That adds on to people's not only, okay, now I have to do an additional step, look at what the AI is telling me, but then interpret how do I make actionable things or actionable outcomes out of what the AI is telling me to do. I think that probably creates that additional layer of burden on any user, be it clinician or non-clinicians. And I have had some interesting cases when you can put the design thinking hat, you go to the people who are actually utilizing a tool. And what we found, we were building this new AI algorithm for them. Apparently, they already had an AI algorithm which was giving them outputs, and they were just overriding the AI outputs, right? Because they thought that wasn't what they were looking for. So that is critical of how do you build that trust, any model, any tool, that the users trust it, but it has to be not blind trust. And when the AI does the prediction or any tool does a prediction, it needs to be verifiable, and almost that explainability should be there of how did it come with that insight or that outcome based on these parameters or assumptions. So that is very critical when people will then think through this and agree or disagree, but at least they know the thinking process of AI, and it's just not a black box for them, right? So that is going to be critical in anything we build.
And I would add one more thing, that the training for any product that is going to be integrated, there should be some education and training provided on the scope of the use, the limitations of it, the boundaries of it, right? And also, how do you report and escalate errors? All of this is so important. Even from a product perspective, you need these insights back as feedback so you can make this take this feedback and make incremental improvements in the experience in the product itself.
Yeah, what I see out there right now in terms of market acceptance for AI, including Gen AI, would be number one would be like pharma and biotech companies. They seem to be more aggressive in implementing and actually putting things into production. And then the second one would be the insurance companies. The larger insurance companies, like I was working with a guy from Aetna CVS. They were looking at AI to help lower their cost of their call center, their contact center. And then the third would be, hospitals and, actual providers, where there's a big disconnect. The management at the hospitals want to use AI to save millions of dollars, but they can't figure out how to do it. So I would put that as number three. Yeah.
Perfect. Is there anything else that you guys wanna discuss or have any questions around that could be useful?
I love the question, Shaariq, you had. How do we measure impact, right? Any tool, any new model, like how do we measure impact? So I'm curious to hear from other speakers of how do they measure impact in their industry.
Was that the one around which metrics best demonstrate? I can share my thoughts, Sangeeta. So honestly, I don't think there is a one size fit all when it comes to, what metrics to use. And if you want to demonstrate the effectiveness and value from an AI-powered application or product, the metrics, in my mind, have to be tied to the intent of the AI applications. And usually, for any AI-powered product or use case, there are two types of main metrics. The first one is what you call your model metrics, right? these are usually well known and easy to calculate. These are things like your sensitivity, specificity, accuracy, your blue, rouge, CAG, hallucination, and all of those. And now there is a lot of vendor tools or even open source packages that can help you just calculate all of this right out of the box. But this first type of metric will rarely help you measure your ROI or let you demonstrate the effectiveness and value. The second type of metric is your what I call like the business metric, which is tied to the intent of the product. So, for example, which business operations, which workflow, which process was being enabled by the said AI? What improvements were imagined in existing processes by bringing in AI? Incremental or net new? And based on this understanding of the intent, the metric always have to be decided, designed, and defined. And these are not your technical metrics because you will not find the definition in any technical textbook. So you could have things like your, operational and economic metrics, like maybe workflow time saved or clinician time freed. These could be your safety metrics, say, what's the harm rate from your false positive and false negative? As a business, you want to know that. What are the changes in diagnostic accuracy when you introduced AI? What are your treatment adherence to guidelines? So if an AI is recommending treatment, how many times is it recommend or it's adhering to the guidelines or the time to treatment? These metrics, they have to be tailored and they are always context aware. These are not your model metrics. And even for the first type of technical metrics, Sangeeta, the choice of the metric, right, to use will depend on the context of the application or your use case. And even though they have a definition and you can calculate them with, using open source package or any vendor tool in a standard way, but the value of the metric that you're going to call it a good number or a bad number, that is also context dependent. So you may have case, say, for example, the accuracy of say 75% is good enough and impactful for business, right? But there may be other use cases when you need accuracy to be over 95% to have any business impact. So what's an acceptable number of that metric? That is context dependent again, and which is where really you need to determine not just the right technical metric to use, but also what's a good enough value, right, to achieve that business impact. And this is fundamentally, it's like a product or a business function. And once there is alignment on these, like calculating any of this has to be done in a transparent and reproducible fashion. So that's my take on like, how do you come up with these metrics? Like it's a combination, technical as well as your context aware metrics.
Like
And
a
of course, I would
business perspective, right? From the business users, maybe the business
precisely.
user should define what good looks like for them to adopt the tool, right? Or adopt this.
And it's tied to the intent of the application. Why did we purchase it or why did we build it in the first place? And I would also add that apart from these two, you will also have things like your equity metrics, right? Like your trust metrics, your usability metrics. So I fundamentally see this as a product function, like the intent of the building or buying the product, and then like designing these metrics with your use case, your context in mind.
Yeah, so I can give an example of that. So we were working with a client and they had a workflow process where they would check basically whether or not some insurance rule conflicted with their big rule. So insurance companies might change the rules. They might have to see, okay, now it's conflicting. I need to write a new rule. And they showed us the process one time and it took like 8 hours. It was crazy looking at that. So like that's basically right now you kind of got our benchmark. And as Shaheen was saying, like what's the problem this AI tool is trying to solve? Well, we're trying to save them time. It takes 8 hours to check these rules. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is build a tool that will automatically check for conflicts. And so we were able to build that. And what we do, like specifically, like one of the things that they can do is, most of the time, folks track their time in Jira or whatever your tool of choice is. So say, how long did you take to track this analysis. So what we're doing now is being able to try and track how long is it taking you to solve this now. Ideally, our benchmark is 8 hours. Hopefully, ideally it will get them down to maybe 30, 40 minutes. And so that's what we're working on now. And so that's kind of an example of how you might take that business context in action.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the health network that I was referring to early, they are looking to save like $200 million by implementing AI. And, when you think about it, when looking at the problem, like $200 million is a lot of money. But if you were to do things like build an AI solution for, let's say, inventory management, if you need to get, hospital supplies, which are a big expense, if you get them cheaper, faster, more suppliers that deliver quicker, et cetera, you can start chipping away at that using AI. And then where we're going with this is like an AI agent, that you as a human, you're the human in the loop, but the AI agent look at what the inventory is and say, hey, I need to order another 1,000 pair of gloves for the hospital next week, right? So there are ways you can start, chipping away at it. But I think it starts with like you asked, like one of the metrics. In this case, they were looking to save, $200 million, which is a lot of money, and it's going to be hard for them to achieve that.
No, thank you guys. Honestly, it's been really good. A really good roundtable. I'm gonna wrap things up just because I'm conscious on time, and yeah, I know you guys got other things to do. But no, it's been really good. I did want to say that I will catch up with each of you separately just to kind of get your thoughts on everything and just get some feedback pretty much. I was gonna ask, are we able to take a quick picture just so I can use it as a thumbnail on the screen? Will it be okay?
Go for
Yeah.
it.
Perfect. Right. Well, thank you guys so much for jumping on the call, and I'm sure we'll speak soon. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coordinating it.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much. Lovely meeting everyone.
No
Yeah.
problem. Have a good day, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.